Hello, everyone. Welcome to the True Mind Shifters channel.
Our focus today is to share with viewers our perspective of how fear of judgment impacts our personal and professional lives. We'll share some stories and experiences with real examples, which make us true, and offer a glimpse of how we handled these different situations so that it helps you reflect on your own life. We've spoken so far about fear and fear of failure. We also introduced the True Mind Shifters Change Framework. This framework gives you a great set of steps to overcome your fears, and it's completely applicable to what we'll be talking about today. If you find this topic interesting, please help amplify the goodness of this channel. Please like this video, subscribe, and share our channel with others. So let's get to it.
So, today we're talking about fear of judgment. I'm sure that anyone who is listening to us right now would say, "Oh, yeah, I have that fear." Because many of us are growing up with, unfortunately, an exposure to the causes of fear of judgment, right? So, what causes it? What is it? Being judged is when someone is evaluating your actions or your appearance against a standard developed by a group of people, whether it's a society or culture or family, it doesn't matter. But you are being compared to whatever standard that has been established. It creates a decision making system. It is where there are right and wrong appearances, right and wrong actions, and everything is compared. So when people are growing up, they're being led by the notion that if I say something wrong that is not in line with a standard developed by my family, school, kindergarten, friendship circle, cultural accepted, right? That means that I'm bad, ugly, undeserving of being respected, loved, liked. And that's going back to the question of right or wrong, good and evil, loved and loved. So fearing to be judged is a person's personal defense mechanism to protect their inner self from being disliked, from being hated. In personal life, fear of judgment can come from dressing differently, right? We have a standard. Since the little kids are born, we have a standard. Everything pink is a girl, everything blue is boy, right? So whatever you wear has to be in line with the expectation of a family, culture, society. However you look, what do you think? What do you say, right? It has to be in line with an expectation of majority. What is majority? Majority is basically can be described by people who like to think alike and stay in a group. And interestingly enough, in ethics, there is also a term called groupthink. When people are afraid to share their own individual opinion, be individual, because they're fearing of being judged. So in personal life, as I mentioned, it could be anything close, uh, people you hang out with, choice of your future profession, where you live, and so forth. In professional life, the group thing is clearly shown when people are not motivated to share their own opinions on the project, on the product, or whatever, right? In a professional setting, because they are afraid of being judged. And I totally know that everyone has had their experience with being judged and with the fear of it. When around us we have a creation of a certain condition that makes us feel that we're not good enough because we're compared to something or someone, we're hurt. We're absolutely hurt. And that hurt is creating a fear because no one wants to feel hurt. And that is the fear of not fitting in, therefore a fear of judgment. What are your thoughts, Eva?
So I think of judgment as the land of where shoulds come from. And I don't necessarily enjoy the idea of the shoulds. I know that we all have them and we experience them. And in certain cases, we need to have standards that we expect people to live up to or perform to so that people are safe or that we can rely and trust what each other say. That said, I can immediately go to a few things around my own life. I'll start with home first. My mom, super nice, loving, caring. But I realized this past year when I started reflecting on how I act when my husband's not not in a good space. And I actually was showing up shaming him, thinking he shouldn't be acting this way. What's wrong with him? And I realized and remembered my mom used to say in Spanish, ¿Qué muchacha esta? Which is, what kind of girl are you? And I would sort of stop and question, what kind of girl am I? Wow, that. And so it's interesting, this judgment and this statement of her to question me, right? What kind of girl are you? Was what would happen at home, which is interestingly linked. I see it very connected to shame and guilt. So I think that while judgment is the action and our fear of it is because the byproduct, I think, becomes shame and guilt. And then we become afraid that we don't want to have this label and be thought of less than, less worthy of love, less worthy of admiration, less worthy of promotion when you flip it to work. And there's something, I worked in an industry of primarily engineers most of my career, highly intelligent, accurate profession, right? Like very well educated profession. Accuracy is very important. But before you even met someone, they would sometimes, not everyone, would evaluate your credentials and decide if you were worthy enough. And so there was this natural judgment. And in some cases, the credentials gave people extra credibility, and that made sense. But if you were someone like me, or maybe even a working engineer that didn't have a degree, you wouldn't even talk about that. So the non-technical people were being judged by the technical people. And this I've seen in other industries as well, in healthcare, clinical, non-clinical. And I guess that's where the dark side of judgment comes in, is if we start to use judgment as a way to demean people, minimize people, marginalize people, there's something to be afraid of with, if you're going to marginalize me or tell me that my view doesn't matter, then you've put me in a precarious situation I've got to figure out. So I've seen this in professional settings, and there's one last thing that's come to mind when I think of judgment. Many years ago, we had a newsletter, and I would write newsletters about upcoming programs for the month. And I'll never forget it. I spelled September, and it was the year of the newsletter, but I flipped the P and the T. I received back in the email in mail, because it was interoffice mail, I received back one executive sent me back the note with a big in felt tip pen, press F7, which does autocorrective spelling, press F7 before printing. And then another one sent back the same newsletter at the top, great job, exclamation point. So it was like this glaring example of how the judgment of my work is being done through different lenses. And some people will see the flaws and some people will see the goodness. So not to say that there wasn't a mistake, it's just, I never forgot from that point on that in a professional setting, while we are being evaluated, and performance evaluations are a whole other animal, that people will see us differently. And in some ways, it took the angst out of the feedback process a little bit for me, because some people were always going to be critical, and some people will tend to err to the side of of seeing the goodness, and some people are going to be in the middle. So what matters most is, did I do the best possible job that I could do? And if I made a mistake, am I learning from that mistake to perform better at work? So those are just some of my own true examples from my life. Marina, what about you?
Before I share my examples from my life, I'd like to understand how you dealt with it. What did you do about it when you realized, when you came across those realizations?
Thanks, Marina. It just struck me, the juxtaposition of the two different feedbacks on, the great job and the press F7 before printing in all caps, red felt tip pen. They were just so glaringly different that it forced me to see it. It almost helped me. It was almost better than that I had received it in like physical format, to get these notes from these colleagues that were executives. And yeah, it just helped it put it in perspective for me. It helped me see, this is this person's view and that person's view, and it's the same body of work. And ever since then, I've also looked at, when a manager would give me feedback at work, I would think, okay, that's their perspective. And I would do whatever I could to take what I could from what they said. So I always looked for the good from what they said. I didn't take it personally from that point on, because I understood that it was a representation of their point of view more than it had to do with my self-worth, my learning, my growth. It was not a criticism.
What you're trying to say is that once you realize that people look at the same, exactly the same thing very differently, you decided that you're going to trust your voice, you're going to trust your inner self, your intuition, your soul, right? And process the feedback you're getting and then execute, right? And that's exactly what I was going to share, is that I realized that what we're getting is, as I mentioned in the beginning of a conversation, this comes from our childhood as well, right? When kids are little, they don't know, they're not preview of what judgment is. They're free. And then we all start creating boundaries, and we understand that we need to have some type of a boundary, right? But unfortunately, because generation over generation, we're overdoing it, we're creating such boundaries that starts creating fears for kids. And that's what we grew up with, and our kids grow up with. And an example I will give is from my childhood. So I absolutely believe that the fear of judgment comes from the childhood. It's not something that we get when we're grown. We're already there. In my particular situation, my mother, I'm gonna say that she's a wonderful woman, and she's very much loved by me and by our family and a lot of people that know her. But she, since she was young, she had to fend for herself because she was an orphan. She became an orphan at a young age. And so she developed this authoritative behavior. And of course, she was growing up in the Stalin regime, where kids were completely submissive to the authoritative behaviors of the leaders. And that's what they learned as well. So as she unfortunately was executing that particular structure at our house, she created a huge insecurity in me. And I constantly was afraid of being judged by her in everything I do, because she was judging everything I do. I remember growing up and what I heard constantly: "Oh, you did this great, but you can do better. You look good, but you can do better. You need to do better and better and always better." And so as I grew up, and regardless what I've done in my life, what I've achieved, on the back of my mind was that I need to make sure that I match her expectation. So I'm not being judged for my actions, for my looks, for my life. I don't want to be judged for my life. Unfortunately, growing up in such environment, I acquired those same issues. And I caught myself that I passed those issues to my son, who had some type of these insecurities. Thank God he's a lot better with that. And I caught myself quite early as he was growing up. So we're able to work on that. And I actually see a reversal and all of the incredible benefits and opportunities of not judging. However, I do have to say, like when somebody says, but how do you do it, right? Oh my gosh, it's literally breaking through internal mind walls. That's what it feels like. And I'm able to do that once again, utilizing the True Mind Shifters Change Framework 1, 2, 3, 4. And also trusting that this particular behavior is not only not serving me well in my life, but it also really important to resolve because it's hurting my son, it's hurting my family, and I don't want to continue that path. I would like to be the one who turns the tables and turns negative into the positive. That's what helps. A lot of hard work.
What I realized as we've been talking about this and what I've seen also be true is it was easier for me to address the judgment in a professional setting, right? Where it's like you have this role, this responsibility, this standard of performance, and then you're getting the feedback from a leader. And that's even set up to have on a regular basis. But at home, it's completely different. And, my own realization that I'm being super critical of my husband. And then while he's having a hard time, I'm being judgmental, right? Like that's not helpful, but I wasn't even really conscious of it. I was too busy sitting in my point of view thinking, well, he shouldn't do that, and not questioning, how do I show up when he has a hard time? No one, and who's going to help me see that other than people we've engaged in our life to help us with healing in our own marriage and our own individual lives. So it's taken a lot of help from other people as well as the interest in reflecting on what can I do differently. Some of this is, like you said, very deeply ingrained from childhood. We're not even conscious of it. And we have implemented, maybe you could call it coping mechanisms. I don't know that I want to use that word, but we've implemented ways of handling judgment. And in some ways we've embodied, like in my own case, I just took the judgment and then I started embodying it using the shoulds, like, well, he shouldn't act like that, or he shouldn't do that. And who am I to say what someone else should and shouldn't do when they're having an emotional challenge? What place is that of mine? And I've learned it's not my place. And if I'm going to be a supportive partner, I'm going to help my partner through it. If I have a hard time with that, I need to step away. I need to be respectful of what his needs are, what my boundaries are, what I can do, and what I can't. So I think personally it's challenging because we don't have the same mechanisms. And I don't think that we talk about judgment in this way at all, ever. Like I can't think of any context where we talk about judgment as we have today.
It would be interesting to hear from our viewers. Please comment. We really need to hear from you, but we would love to hear your perspective. And if you don't want to be kind of identifying yourself, that's not a problem. There is an opportunity to submit the feedback to us directly, and we will provide that opportunity in our description of this story. So then we can talk about it. We can talk about it with all of you and share other people's perspectives while keeping their identity confidential. With that said, I would like to share a couple of thoughts. First and foremost, fear of judgment is a huge topic, and I think that we will come back to it in our following sessions. But we would like to leave you with a couple of quotes, and one of them is pretty significant, and that is, the way we choose to see the world creates the world we see. Please think about it. And the second one, discover the genuine you and make the world a better place. This is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have. And if you cannot hear it, you will all your life spend your day on the ends of the strings somebody else pulls. That's Howard Thurman. So, fear of judgment is one of the strings that are being pulled by others, and we allow that. So, it's up to us to be our genuine selves and not fear who we are.
When you share the quote, sometimes I see things, and one of the things I envision is this garden, but like covered in weeds and like shrubs that have died and branches that are in the way. And the judgment is these things that sort of cover up this beautiful garden underneath. And so clearing away, I just picture us all, if we can all attempt to clear away other people's stories, other people's judgment, to then tap into who we really are and make sure we're not subscribing, if you will, to other people's stories of who we are, how good we are. We're all good inside. And maybe there are things that are covered up from failures or other people's views, but we all have goodness, and I hope we can all clear it away so we can be our best self. So it's time to wrap things up. We hope that these stories have helped you think about your own life as you face the fear of judgment, and that you know that you're not alone.
So, goodbye for now. We're sending you away with our empowerment, support, and love.